On behalf of the Trustees of Manx National Heritage, it's my pleasure to welcome you all along here today for this auspicious occasion. Not for the first time in Castletown has Captain Quilliam been unveiled, but I think personally a better situation. We as trustees obviously have a big investment in Castletown. We have so many buildings, and the upkeep is something phenomenal. And also we've invested deeply from our reserves into Castletown, but hopefully it will bring visitors in and help to rejuvenate Castletown and keep it lively. It's also my pleasure to welcome Captain Jack Ronan, an old friend. Good to see you here, Jack.
Thank you, Malcolm. Pleasure to be here.
Good. I think without further ado, having welcomed you all, I will hand over to Edmund Southworth, who will give us some information on Captain Quilliam.
Well, to extend and repeat that welcome, and we've been trying to calculate in the last few seconds whether the sun was about to shine on us or the opposite, but I think we've just about got it right. It's been a tumultuous year for many reasons, and I'm conscious that this is one of only a smaller number of events that would have been taking place on this day. For me as a heritage professional, one of the most disturbing, or no other way to describe it, sights on the television was the footage of a statue being pulled down from its plinth and dumped unceremoniously into Bristol Harbour. Well, I can understand some of the issues and the motivation behind that, but as a museum curator by training, the idea that you sort of take all these statues down and put them into a museum and, that dreaded word, contextualise them, dreadful word, no idea what it means, that's anathema, and it's anathema to us at Manx National Heritage. So I thought actually I would contextualise, give you some of that background, some of the different levels, rather unveiling 7 or more veils, or just unpeeling an onion, whichever you prefer as an analogy. But this, at its heart, is a piece of public art, commissioned by Tynwald to commemorate a particular individual on an anniversary of his most famous achievement. And it was commissioned locally by a Manx team working under Sir David Wilson, and commissioned by a living Manx artist, Brian Neal. And I have to say that Brian is still with us, thankfully, and he thoroughly approves of what we've been doing. So who was this Manx individual commemorated? Anyway, Quilliam, he's got his name. Well, you'll have to wait a little while till Frank Cowan and Professor Lambert have finished their magnum opus to get the full story of who Quilliam was and what he has done. It's tricky. Not all the records survive. We know some things well, and in particular when it comes to Trafalgar, we don't know a huge amount about what he actually did in detail. But Quilliam was born in Marown, 1771, joins the Navy 10 years later, appears as a supernumerary, which is basically a guy you couldn't afford to lose in naval terms, clearly good with a hammer and nails, probably working in a dockyard at the time, and then appears on the crew lists of HMS Lion. He rises rapidly through the ranks. He's not bought a commission. He's not one of those wealthy officers who doesn't know anything at all about the craft. He becomes a master, he's a mate, he's a master's mate, and so on. He works his way up. And by 1798, he's actually a lieutenant. And he does very well from the capture by a squadron of British ships of 2 incredibly rich Spanish vessels. The prize money, I did write it down, £618,000 was the total prize money shared out between the crews of that small squadron. And in today's money, he became a millionaire overnight, not without risk. At a subsequent engagement in the Battle of Copenhagen, Quilliam was one of the last left alive when it came to the officers, and as a lieutenant, he ended up in control and in charge of his boat. That brought him to Nelson's attention, and Admiral Lord Nelson asked, we think, for him to join Victory. And the exploits of Quilliam below decks of Victory are the stuff of legend. He takes control of the steering. He's already the first lieutenant. He isn't, he's a senior officer on board that boat. And he comes through it. It's a hugely important time in his life. He subsequently comes back to the island. He's invited to join the House of Keys, but he gave it up. I think he was bored. He went back to sea. And on retirement from the Navy, he settles back here in Castletown, balcony house in the square, and he apparently enjoyed fishing. Why not? Most of the legend, the stories, the tales about him were told by other people. He seems to have been quite quiet, quite modest, and he didn't write a biography. He didn't sell the television rights. He was content here in Castletown, and who can blame him? What was so important about Trafalgar on this day, 215 years later? I told Frank I was going to try and summarise it in under 50 words. That's a real challenge. Probably in advance of an invasion by Napoleon of Britain, a combined French and Spanish fleet of 31 vessels made their way into the English Channel or La Manche if you're on the other side. 27 ships under the command of Lord Nelson destroyed 22 of the people facing them. And technically, no British ships were lost. Though in a battle of that nature, with unconventional tactics, with Nelson streaming 2 columns straight into the enemy broadside, there were massive casualties on both sides. 66 Manxmen are thought to have served in that battle. And it's a tribute to them that we stand here today and tell that story. There are those who say that Trafalgar set the scene for the British Navy's domination of the seas until World War II. Nelson was probably the most important celebrity of his time, and his death was a national tragedy. This statue is not a war memorial, and there is a memorial to the Manxmen who served at Trafalgar on Douglas Head, and that is an appropriate place to celebrate that. But it's worth just reminding you, and those in the Quilliam group will know this toast well, to the immortal memory of Lord Nelson and those who fell with him, is this toast given at the traditional Trafalgar Day dinner. And I think it's important that we remember that this was a massive loss of life. And of course, as you unveil or unpeel the layers of history, it's clear that much of the success of the Navy derives from the massive economic resources available to the British from their colonies. And as you enjoy your coffee, David, your tea, your chocolate, what was it I saw with chocolate? Mostly with sugar. And maybe when you go home, sneak a quiet pipe of tobacco, or dare I say, a glass of rum. Remember also the human cost of the wealth that built these ships, and indeed some of the houses in Castletown. Why this? Why here? Why now? Quite early in my tenure as director, the then Chief Minister, Tony, and I am still grateful, I think, invited me to join the Regeneration Committee here in Castletown. And we were keen, and we still are keen, that M&H align what we do alongside what else was happening in the town. And this was one of these areas that was flagged up by consultants originally to, that needed work doing. And we've done our bit to help. One of my team, one of Kirsty's team, wrote all the text for all the signs that you see explaining the history of the town. And we didn't charge for that, unlike the consultants. And I remember Richard and I, Tony's successor as MHK, walking around the town, and we leant against that wall. I think it was that wall, wasn't it? We looked at the castle, the river, the bay, steam packet house, bridge house, lawn house, and the sheer weight of history that surrounds this spot is almost overwhelming. And at the time, it was a grubby car park, and we felt, didn't we, that the town deserved better. This is, of course, a Civil War gun emplacement. I thought you all know that. Civil War dates, please, come on. What do you teach you in history these days? It protects the medieval castle and the residence of the Lords of Man. Very nice. The Lords of Man built a residence with windows. They're not good against cannon. So the new work constructed here. The building behind you is early 19th century. It's the English War Department as part of the garrison. And I'm standing on the remains of an 18th century customs house, and it's customs and the actual revestment which changes the nature of this island to being, whether we like it or not, English for 200 or so years. All physical reminders of this ancient capital. It's now not a car park. It's public open space, regenerated as part of the work in the town. And public open space is where you put your statues. Quite frankly, not in museums. I'm very grateful for the hard work by my team, and I will single out Castletown resident Steve Blackford, head of properties, hiding somewhere. He's over there, Steve. Chris Weeks, conservation guru. Kirsty, her team for the interpretation. Our thanks to Cubbins, doing stonework. Man crane hire for very, very safely removing it from its original location and replacing it. And Castle Thomas Architects. And last but certainly not least, my thanks to Captain Jack for agreeing to do the final part of our ceremony. And I also have to pay tribute to what he's done alongside what we're doing in keeping the actions of Manx naval and merchant seamen in our minds. Thank you, everybody. Jack, over to you.
I'll commence. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think it's appropriate that I tell you the story that's come to me relevant to the Captain John Quilliam. At the Battle of Copenhagen, he was lieutenant on the HMS Amazon. She was badly shot up. She was very light drafted, so she could get in close, and that made a target for the shore batteries. The upper deck was wiped out. Commanding officer and his officers. The most senior left was Captain John Quilliam. Lord Nelson was second in command of the British fleet, and it was his duty to go around the remnants, what was left, to see how they were doing. And he came to the Amazon and was aboard, and he met Lieutenant Quilliam, as he would be then. Who's in command? Captain Quilliam looked round. He said, I suppose I am. And how are you doing? Oh, he said Midland. Thank you very much. You'd have to be Manx to understand that one. Mr. Chairman, Castletown Commissioners, and the Town Commissioners, Manx Heritage, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with honour and humility I unveil this statue of our hero countryman, the distinguished Captain Quilliam. I wish him well in this well-chosen new location. Full marks to Manx Heritage for finding this most apt of nautical sites, a safe anchorage. It befits the worthy captain's status and memory. Now, my pleasure, if Kirsty would help me.
Very technical.
I done this on my own in 2005.